Today's video is sponsored by PCBWay. More on that later. Whether you call it beanbag toss, cornhole, tailgate toss, or just bags, we all know what you're talking about. We've all played it. And frankly, we're all bored of it. That's right, it's time to revolutionize the game of bags. Literally. Alright, so in case you didn't gather from my pun, I'm going to be making some cornhole boards, which is what I call them because I'm from Iowa. But I'm not going to be making just any cornhole boards. I'm going to be making them with a rotating platform so that the target hole moves, because this game isn't hard enough as is. Now, I'm definitely not the first person to make boards like this. I actually got the idea from Peech, and I'll have his channel linked down in the description below in case you're interested. But with the help of 3D printing and today's video sponsor, PCBWay, I'm going to be putting a new spin on his idea. I could do this all day. The beginning of this project pretty much looks like the building of any other bags boards ever, so I'm just going to spare you that by playing that footage really fast right now. Basically, I cut down a sheet of 3/4 inch plywood into 2 foot by 4 foot pieces, then cut some 1 by 3s for the frame and legs. Next, I used my trusty Krag pocket hole jig to assemble the frame and join it to the plywood. With the main frame done, I drilled the holes on either side to attach the legs with some 1/2 inch carriage bolts, propped the board up so the back was 12 inches high, measured and cut the legs to size, and cut out a 6-inch hole for the target. Anyways, once I had one of the boards done, I just copy-pasted it, and then I had a complete game of bags. Now, I rushed through that on purpose because this is not a video on how to build bags boards. How you choose to build your boards doesn't really matter, with the exception being that any cross-bracing you add for strength may end up getting in the way of the rotating platform, so keep that in mind. I used a 16th inch drill bit to not only pre-drill the starting hole for the jigsaw, but also to act as the axis for the circle cutting jig itself. Then I just took my time with the cut and had a giant hole in no time. If you want to, you could just stop here and have just the easiest game of bags ever, but I'm not that bad, so I'm gonna keep going. Up to this point, this has been a strictly woodworking project, and it's time to change that. I need to make this platform be suspended in this hole and spin around. Now, the other versions of this that I've seen use a rotisserie kit as the motor, but aside from the fact that they only go a few different speeds, in my head, I was mostly worried about the wobble. I want this platform to feel sturdy like a regular bags board that just happens to spin. So the obvious solution is to use a giant 20-inch Lazy Susan bearing, but they're expensive and either a little bit too big or too small for my needs. So I have a couple of cheaper DIY ideas that I want to try first. My first idea was to just 3D print a Lazy Susan bearing entirely. The bearing itself is made up of an inner ring and an outer ring locked together with some 3/8 inch steel balls. The only difference, aside from it being 3D printed, is that it has a set of teeth on the inside ring that integrate with a gear that'll be powered by a stepper motor. Now, designing this bearing ended up being a lot more challenging than I expected, and I ended up going through several iterations and wasting a ton of filament, but finally, after hours of printing, they don't work at all. To make these bearings fit on my printer, I had to break each ring into 9 segments that I then bolted together again. Now, if 3D printers were perfect, this might work, but 3D printers aren't perfect, and there were problems. First, obviously, plastic is flexible, and that made it incredibly hard to get the bearings aligned on the boards while I was installing them. Second, each of these joints where the ring segments come together introduced a little bump in what would otherwise be a smooth track for the balls to roll along. So I sanded and sanded until I couldn't stand sanding anymore, and it helped. I was finally able to spin the bearings, and they worked okay until I attached them to the board. It turns out the weight of the platform combined with the flexible filament made for a rotating platform that doesn't like rotating at all. I can get them to spin around by hand, but it's tough, and no motor is going to be able to spin these platforms around, at least one that can be powered by a battery. So after a long shower cry, I was struck with an idea. What if I was thinking about this the wrong way? What if instead of attaching a bearing to a rotating platform, I made the rotating platform into a bearing? Hear me out. So if I make a groove on the edge of the spinning platform, a matching groove on the edge of the outer board, and lock them together with the 3/8 inch bearing balls, I can scrap the 3D printed bearing altogether. I'll still need to print the gear so I can actually spin the platform, but that shouldn't be a problem. And after making sure it worked on a test piece, I went ahead and routed it onto the first board, and it didn't work at all. Somehow, the gap ended up too big. Even after doing a test cut, which worked, it was about 1/8 of an inch too big, so the steel balls could get offset and jam themselves up, which obviously isn't going to work. Plus, the platform had a ton of play, which I don't want either. What I need is a 15/16 inch bearing, but I only have a 7/8 and a 1 inch bearing. So I can get the right gap by using the 1 inch bearing on one of the cuts and the 7/8 bearing on the other cut. And finally, after several iterations, multiple different routers and router bits, it actually spins fairly easily, and I'm starting to think this project might actually work. I still have to fix the other board that I ruined, but I wasted enough of your time already, so I'll do that off camera. Anyways, now that these platforms are mounted and they spin mostly freely, I need to make them spin with a motor. Now, any electric motor will work, but to implement some of these special features I have in mind, which I'll show you later, I decided to use a stepper motor that's controlled by an Arduino Nano. I'm using a TMC 2209 driver, which is a common choice, but the wiring can be a little bit tricky. So rather than soldering dozens of tiny little wires by hand, I designed and ordered some PCBs from today's video sponsor, PCBWay. Now, I've been both using and sponsored by PCBWay for several years now, and they have yet to let me down. Once I had my circuit board designed, it was a simple matter of uploading the Gerber files to their website, selecting my design settings, and finding a new show to watch while they made them for me. After a couple days, I was the new proud owner of some awesome matte black PCBs, and as expected, they were manufactured exceptionally well. And they don't only make PCBs either, they also offer 3D printing, CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, and injection molding services, so no matter what your project is, PCBWay can make it a reality. If you want to make this project or some other project for that matter, you can use the link in the description to get $5 off your first order. Huge thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it. Anyways, now that I've got my shiny new PCBs, it's time to do a little bit of soldering and get started putting the electronics together. Now, the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed a secret feature I snuck into these PCBs. Now, if you know what it is, leave a comment down below. Otherwise, stick around to the end for the reveal. Yeah, look at that. Okay, at this point, you've seen how the bearing works and how the platform's gonna spin, but I wanted to take a minute to talk through the electronics again real quick. So underneath the boards, we've got an Arduino Nano acting as the brains, a 12-volt battery pack which has the charging circuitry inside it, and a control panel on the front with 4 low buttons. Now, you might be asking yourself, what does a build like this need a control panel for? Well, a power button for one thing. I don't want this thing to be on all the time, but the other 3 buttons are, in my opinion, the best part of this entire project. The left 2 buttons are just for speed control, so I can adjust how fast the platform is spinning at any time. But the last button is the fun one. This button acts as a mode button, allowing the players to choose between 3 different game modes. The first game mode will be a continuous rotation where you can use the speed buttons to adjust how fast the platform spins, and pressing both speed buttons together will switch the direction of rotation. The second game mode will cause the board to move to a random position for each round, where it will stay until the up button is pressed, at which point it will move to another random location. The last and best game mode is Absolute Chaos. In this game mode, the platform will spin in a random direction for a random amount of time at a random speed randomly. At this point, making your throw into the hole will be pretty much sheer luck. Now, in the event that you just want to play a regular game of bags, I also added a magnetic sliding lock to the underside that locks the platform into position so you can happily return to the traditional gameplay. To wrap these boards up, I sanded everything down, finished with some polyurethane so they can withstand a little bit of moisture, drilled some holes in the side for rope handles, and installed latches so I can close them up like a suitcase to carry them around. And with that, I can officially call my rotating cornhole boards Mark I complete. Now, I think this project turned out awesome, but before I let you go, I want to do a quick post-mortem analysis of this project to talk about some of the things that went well and some other things that didn't quite go as well as they could have. First off, it ended up being way harder to design a working Lazy Susan bearing than I thought it would be. But I think I ended up with a decent solution that's fairly easy to implement. A couple downsides to this design though, it's kind of loud, especially when it's moving fast. So I could see it being kind of annoying if you're trying to have a nice relaxing game of bags and all you can hear is the rattling of these platforms spinning around. The weight of the bags doesn't seem to affect its ability to rotate though, so that's kind of nice. But I didn't do a great job actually routing the races, so I ended up with a couple bumps in the race where I had the router at a slight angle. That, combined with the mid-tier plywood I used, resulted in a bearing race that didn't work as well as I hoped. It's definitely cheaper to make the bearings this way, especially if you ignore all the wasted filament and unnecessary tool purchases. But if I redo this project, I'll try using real bearings and see how much better it is. As is, I needed the NEMA 23 motors, but those of you with more woodworking skill than me may be able to get by with just NEMA 17s, which would save you some money. Speaking of money, this project ended up costing a net total of $232 for the NEMA 23 version, or about $200 for the NEMA 17 version. So in other words, this is a great way to make a cheap set of cornhole boards really expensive. Now, you definitely could save some money by buying some of the parts locally or in bulk if you plan on making more than one set, but if you're on a budget, this might not be the best project for you. There's one last thing that I wanted to mention about these boards, and in fact the PCBs in particular. Earlier in the video, I teased a secret feature that I snuck onto the PCB design, and that secret feature is these three little output pins that can be used to control a 12-volt LED strip. If you were the first person to correctly guess that in the comments, you win absolutely nothing, but I appreciate the effort and the comment for that matter. I didn't end up adding LEDs to this build because I'd rather have the extended battery life, but I wanted to throw those pins on there just in case I decided to add them later, or one of you is building this project and wanted to add them yourself. On that note, if you're interested in making these bags boards, the plans are linked in the description below, along with a bunch of other plans from my other projects. Now, making plans for these projects takes infinitely more energy than making the projects themselves, so I truly appreciate you supporting this channel by purchasing them. In the end, I absolutely love how this project turned out. I've already had a blast playing with them, and I don't have any friends to play this game with, but when I do get friends, I'll have this awesome version of bags that we can play together. But that is it for this video. Leave a comment down below if you like this project or if you have a better way to design the bearing, and make sure to subscribe if you like seeing content like this. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.